Hello and welcome to today's lesson. We're going to be talking about topics under the Study Island lesson, function operations and compositions, and we're going to be looking at problems from this lesson that we can do straight on the TI-84 calculator. You can also do these questions with paper and pencil, and it's always a great idea to know how to do both ways. However, I just want to show you this skill in case you get stuck on a problem or you want a way to check yourself, and that way you have a fail-safe when you are doing these problems, especially on the EOI. And these problems also correspond to the Algebra 2 Standard 2.1a. So as we're going through these, just make sure that you take notes so you have the steps to refer back to when we are trying these on your own. And try some problems on your own. If you get stuck, just go back through the video and look for problems that are similar and watch those steps again and then try it on your own to see if you can get the correct answer that way. In this first question, we are given two functions. We have f of x equals 2x plus 1 and g of x equals x minus 1. And it wants to know which line on the graph represents the function f plus g of x. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our y equals and put in the f of x and the g of x functions we're given. That's the first step. So we're going to type in y1. I'm going to do the f of x. So I'm going to put in 2x plus 1. So 2x, this is the button right here beside alpha that I used to get the x, plus 1. Scroll down, and then I'm going to put g of x in the y2. So that's going to be x minus 1. And now I want to do y3 as the addition of those two functions, because that's what it's asking for. It's the graph of when you add those two. So to get y in here, we call the first function y1 and the second function y2. So to get y1, I'm going to press this vars button beside clear. I'm going to scroll over to the right one to y vars and select the function. And there is the list of all of my y1s, 2s, 3s, and I want y1 plus y2. So I have to go back through there, scroll over, first choice, then scroll down to y2, press enter. And there I have the two originals and the addition that's going to be graphed. I only need the graph of the addition. So as not to confuse myself, I'm going to go through and turn off y1 and y2 being graphed. And to do that, I move the cursor so it's blinking over top of the equal sign, and I press enter, and that will unhighlight it. So the functions that will be graphed are the only ones that have highlighted equal signs. So since y3 is the only one with a highlighted equal sign, it's only going to graph the addition button. So you can press graph, or I always like to do zoom standard so that I know that my screen is from -10 to 10 in both the y and x axis. And that one, it looks similar to both C and D. So I look here and the problem gives me a window of -5 to 5 on both the y and x axis. So I can actually go back to the window button and make it so that it's the same window. So my x, the x min is where I wanted to start on the x axis, which is -5. X max is where I want the x-axis to end, which is +5. And scale means I want a tick mark at every one, so it'll have a tick mark at -5, -4, -3, -2, -1, 0, and so on. And the same for the y min, that's where the y-axis starts. Y max is where it starts, so I set those at -5 and 5, and I leave the y scale as 1, and then I press graph, so that now I have the exact same window as what is on the question here, and I can see that this graph here is the same as C. So that means line C is going to be my final answer, which is choice B. This question here gives me two functions, and it asks for what is the value of the function when you subtract them and you evaluate it at -3. So to do that, I'm going to go back into my y equals menu, and I'm going to clear out all the ones that I have typed in there. And I'm going to go back up to y1, and I'm going to type f of x in there. So I'm going to have 5x cubed, and to do the cube I use the caret button, and then I need to scroll to the right out of that so that the rest of my problem is not in the exponent. And I add the plus 10, and then I put g of x for y1. And so here, that's going to be x minus 2. Now, I'm going to put the subtraction part into y3. And I do that the same as before. I'm going to go into this vars button, scroll over to y-vars, press the first option, function, and then I'm going to press 1 to get y1. And then subtract that from y2. So I repeat those steps and select y2. And now I know that y3 is the subtraction of those two functions, which is, it's the subtraction I'm going to evaluate at -3. So to evaluate y3, I'm going to go to the home screen, and I'm going to go ahead and go back in and type y3 into the home screen by repeating the steps and scrolling down to 3. And then I'm going to put a parenthesis -3. And what this is telling the calculator to do is to evaluate y3, which we programmed to be the subtraction of f of x and g of x, at -3. So I press enter, and there's my answer, a -120, which is choice C. Now number 3 is a little bit different because I'm asked to find a division, but I'm not asked to evaluate. So because my answers aren't just a number, they have the x's in them, I'm going to have to compare the graph of the division to the graphs of the answers. And if I get an answer that has the exact same graph as the division, then I know that that is my answer. So first step is to go into y equals and type in my f of x into y1. So f of x here is x cubed, use the caret button for cube, scroll out to the right, plus 12x squared minus 36x minus 432. And then I'm going to put g2 into y, or g of x into y2. And that is x cubed, right arrow out, plus 2x squared minus 36x minus 72. And now I'm dealing with the division here, so I'm going to tell it that I want it to divide f of x by g of x, which would mean y1 divided by y2 to the calculator. So I press vars, right arrow, enter, enter, and that gives me y1. And then I press vars again, but first I need to press divide. And then I go back to press vars, and that's going to right arrow, enter, scroll down to y2, enter, and now it's the division. However, I only care about the division being graphed, so I'm going to scroll so that my cursor is blinking over the top of the equal sign and press enter to unhighlight it, and do that the same for y2. And now that just tells the calculator to not to graph those first two. It's only going to graph what's highlighted. So I need to compare the division of f of x and g of x, which is y1 and y2 to the calculator, to an answer. So I'm going to try this first answer first. And so remember, when you're typing in a numerator into the calculator, that needs to be in parentheses. So parenthesis x plus 12 and parenthesis divide, parenthesis, because the denominator of x plus 2 also needs to be in parentheses. And I find it helpful that when I'm comparing graphs, to scroll over to the left right in front of y4, and so that that line is blinking, and just change it to a thicker line so that I know that the division is the skinny line and the answer I'm seeing is the same or not is the thicker line. Going to graph those by pressing zoom standard, which is choice 6, and I'm watching it graph, and here's a skinny line. And here's more skinny lines, so that's all the same first graph. And now here comes the thicker line right over top of the skinny line. So that means that my answer of choice A here has the exact same graph as the division, so that means A is going to be my answer. Let me show you real quick what the graph would look like on a wrong answer. So if I go back into y equals and just change 4 to choice B, so that you can see what a wrong answer would look like. So I changed it to choice B, and I go into second zoom 6. Oops. So there's y equals, try again, zoom 6. And there I'm watching, it's the skinny graph, so that's all that first graph is division, it's the skinny line. And then my thicker line is in the other corners. So those did not match. They did not graph right on top of each other. So that's what a wrong answer looks like. So my final answer in choice 3 here is letter A. Number 4 is another division problem, but this time we're asked to evaluate it. So we're not going to look at the graph. So we're still going to type them into y equals. So I'm going to go ahead and clear out everything that I had typed in here so the calculator doesn't get confused. And go back up to y1, and I'm going to once again put in f of x for y1. So this is going to be x cubed, so caret button 3, right arrow out to get the x cubed, minus x, and that's f of x. So then for y2, I'm going to type in g of x, which is x minus 2. Now, it is the division that we care about, so we're going to make y3 the division of f of x and g of x. And so that is going to be done by pressing vars, right arrow, enter, enter, and that puts y1 here. And then I press divide, and I'm going to divide it by y2 because that's what I made g of x. So vars, right arrow, enter, down arrow, enter, and that puts y2 there. And so now I know that I've told the calculator that y3 is the division of x and g of x. So I'm going to click second quit, and I'm going to use this home screen here to calculate the evaluating that at -7. So I've already said that I made y3 the division of f and g. So I'm going to go into vars, scroll over to the right, press enter, scroll down to y3, and I accidentally pressed clear, so I'm just repeating those steps. And there's the choice 3. And that's y3 on the screen. And then I just do parenthesis -7, and that tells the calculator to evaluate the division at -7. And I do that, and I get 37.3333. However, my answer is a fraction, so I just need to tell the calculator to convert this decimal into a fraction. And I do that by clicking the math button, and this first choice here has an arrow fraction. That means convert to a fraction. So I'm going to press enter, and when I do that, it's saying convert the answer to a fraction. That's what ANS stands for, answer, and it's going to take the last answer, which is that 37.33, so it's doing what I want it to. And it converts it to a fraction of 112 over 3, and where I see positive 112 over 3 is choice D, so that's going to be my final answer for number 4. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you learned something new. This was just part 1 of this lesson in Study Island, so make sure that you watch part 2 also to see how to do the composition problems.